should we get started? Gonzalo is on his way.
Yeah, first.
Ambassador, what do you want to do? Let's just give people 1 minute.
We are waiting on one more panelist to show up, so we're going to give her a minute. And if she's not here, we'll get started. And there will be wine. This is a reception afterwards. The most important part. But the issues we are navigating outside right now are where the location of the wine will be. It can't be in here because there's an event afterwards, and it can't be on the patio. So I will give you an update when we find out where the wine will be. Most important piece of any COP. I think we'll go ahead and get started. We do have a presentation ahead of the panel, so hopefully we can get going. But I'm Whitney Berry with the Ocean Conservancy. Thank you all for being here today. On behalf of Ocean Conservancy and Transport and Environment, it's wonderful to have this room. And obviously, this is the Mobilizing and Implementing Ocean-Based Climate Solutions panel, an event that we'll be hosting here today. And so to kick us off, I would really like to welcome my esteemed colleague, Luis Estevez-Helmeron, to the stage. He'll be giving some opening remarks and setting the stage on ocean climate issues and some of the progress we're seeing and the ways forward. So Luis, if you are available, I will welcome you to the stage.
Thank you, Whitney. It's great to see the ocean family here. I'm so excited to actually have you here, covering these important topics. Since this is a Friends of the Ocean and Climate Group event, a hosted event, I thought that I could actually maybe start by telling you a little bit about the group and the wonderful work that we have been doing here at COP. So as you probably know, my name is Luis Estevez-Helmeron. I work for Ocean Conservancy. Ocean Conservancy has served as the acting secretariat for the group, for the Friends of the Ocean and Climate group since 2019. And through the work of the group, we actually have made significant progress in terms of identifying a space to talk about the ocean climate nexus agenda in the UNFCCC, but also in terms of encouraging countries and parties to actually implement and include these ocean-based solutions as part of their national climate strategies. So I'm super excited to actually how the work has been progressing over the last few years. And the Friends of the Ocean and Climate is an informal group. So that's intentional. We invite all the parties to actually join it. We respect the party space to actually make decisions on how we move actually these issues forward, but we also collaborate closely with the NGOs to inform those decisions that countries and parties make related to these initiatives. The group actually provides a space for showcase your leadership, the party's leadership in working the ocean climate nexus, but also help us advance, as I was telling you before, the inclusion of these ocean-based solutions as part of national climate strategies. The Friends of the Ocean and Climate Group allows countries, I already mentioned that. So working together with you, parties and non-party stakeholders, we have made significant progress, for example, through the creation of the Ocean and Climate Change Dialogue. But as I was telling you about NDCs and how we actually promoting these actions, I just wanted to actually showcase or show you a little bit of our analysis of NDCs from parties submitted to the UNFCCC. And we actually have gone through our process of analyzing NDCs from coastal countries and characterize NDCs, ocean-based solutions included in NDCs, represented under these 10 different categories. And you can actually see them here, includes enhancing a blue economy, protecting coastal communities and infrastructure, advancing ocean climate justice, protecting and restoring blue carbon ecosystems, advancing marine protected areas, reducing emissions from the shipping and ports, protecting coastal and marine ecosystems and biodiversity, of course, very important scaling up offshore renewable energy, reducing emissions from offshore oil and gas, and of course, creating climate-ready fisheries. So we have actually looked into these different categories and NDCs and have actually found that most of the coastal countries actually include at least one element of under these different categories. And that is actually shown here. In terms of basic statistics, we found that 85% of the coastal countries actually include one ocean-related action in their NDC, which means that 15% of the countries are actually not including these actions. And that is also something that we need to change. So, but in terms of more specific data, you can see that there are just 2 countries that actually include actions on reducing emissions from offshore oil and gas. There are 14% of the countries that actually include actions on renewable energy, which is going to be one of the main focus of today's discussion. And there are 23% of the countries that include some type of action related to shipping and ports, reducing emissions from that sector. The most common areas and activities that are included in the NDCs from coastal countries are also represented at the bottom. 61 countries of those 97 that I was telling you about include some type of action on protecting and restoring blue carbon ecosystems, 59 on protecting coastal communities and infrastructure, and 46 actually on creating climate-ready fisheries, and that's very relevant for the food security linkages. So we have made, as you can see, significant progress. So maybe this is a nicer way of actually visualizing the commitments. These are all the flags attached to all those 10 categories that I was just telling you about. A nice representation just to see the different distribution under each category. And this is just, as I was telling you, 83 of the 97 include some type of element of ocean-based solution. It actually looks pretty good if you actually start thinking about the percentage of countries, the coastal countries that are including some type of action. So that's all the overview that I want to give you on the NDCs and the work that we have done. So I can tell you that we have done a significant amount of work. We're making progress, but of course we cannot stop there. There is still more that we need to be done. The ocean must be a key element of the response to climate change if we're going to keep the 1.5 degree goal of the Paris Agreement within reach, and of course prevent the worst consequence of the climate impacts that come from these conditions. Therefore, and this is an invitation to all of you, we need to raise our ambition, and we keep talking about this everywhere, and also continue pushing hard for the inclusion of ocean-based climate solutions in the response to climate change. Now, of course, the challenge is quite steep. So no single country or NGO, which all have been collaborating in these efforts, can actually take on this challenge alone. So, parties and non-party stakeholders must collaborate to enhance ambition and implement concrete actions that deliver on our promise to protect the ocean and address the climate crisis. At COP28, the Friends of the Ocean Climate Group has been working extremely hard, especially on pushing for the inclusion of the ocean as part of the GST. This is of critical importance because the ocean is fundamental for climate mitigation and adaptation. And making its inclusion in the global stocktake is crucial for an accurate assessment of our planet's climate health and our progress towards the goals of the Paris Agreement. We were very excited yesterday to announce new members of the group. I'm going to spare you for that information, but let me tell you that we are a pretty big group now. We are over 50 countries that are actually working towards a common goal, which is, of course, include the ocean as part of the climate solution, but ultimately actually producing a good response that let us deal with these issues. So I'll stop there. Just wanted to welcome everyone. If you are not part of the Friends of the Ocean and Climate, I invite you to actually talk to us. We can actually try to include you as part of that group, really good group to actually get things done in the context of the UNFCCC. And we are also exploring ways on how we can use the group to actually integrate these issues across international fora. So an invitation to all of you to continue working hard. Thank you for being here. And just, let's keep the good work. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Luis. It really has been incredible to watch the growth and progress of the Friends of the Ocean and Climate Group. Just even at this COP alone, the GST negotiations, the GGA negotiations, it's been really imperative that the Friends of the Ocean and Climate have been pushing the ocean forward in that climate nexus conversation that's so critical to solving the climate crisis. I want to thank Luis especially for all of his hard work to convene that group of ocean champions. It's been really incredible to see how they work together. And next, I would like to introduce our keynote speaker, a man who really needs no introduction and who's been a true friend and ally of the Friends of Ocean and Climate, Mr. UN Secretary General Special Envoy for Ocean, His Excellency Ambassador Peter Thompson. If you'd like to come up and give remarks, that'd be great.
Thank you very much, Whitney. Thank you, Luis. Thank you, Conservancy. Ocean Conservancy. Sorry. You guys do great work. And it was wonderful to spend all that time together last night with the Friends of Ocean and Climate down at the Ritz. We were putting on the Ritz. You know, I'm not being rude sitting down the end there. This is my last speech after 11 days of closing remarks and opening remarks. This is the last. So hopefully it's the best. I have to run from here to the Ocean Pavilion, change out of my suit, put it in my suitcase, put on my pajamas, get out in a taxi and go straight to the airport. And then I have a 16-hour flight to get home. And Catherine always tells me, I put $1 down to bet that you're going to mention your grandchildren when you get up to speak. And so, yes, I'm hurrying home because my 3-year-old granddaughter Rose will be waiting there to greet me. And she's the light of my life. And the reason I do all this work, otherwise I'd be sitting in Fiji reading novels under a coconut tree, I guess. Hey, the first speech I made at the Ocean Pavilion, it seems like a life ago now, but it was probably 11 days ago, I was really angry. And I told everybody I was angry, and everybody afterwards said, oh, we like angry Peter better than the normal one. And the reason I was so angry is I just read the IEA report from Paris, saying that the oil and gas industry only provides 1% of the contribution towards the transition to renewable energy. 1%. You know, if you read all those billboards on the motorways and in the airport lounges or in the airport halls of the world, you think they're leading it. These are the good guys, you know, who are doing the transition to the renewable energy of our future to give us security. It is lies. It's baloney. They're only giving 1%. They are concentrating on their profits, and that 1% is just a bit of greenwashing. They make $5 trillion worth of profits. And I kind of talked myself out of that by mentioning it half a dozen times, and I got less and less angry as the fortnight passed. But today I'm angry again. You know why? Just as I was walking down here, somebody sent me, my co-chair actually, of the Friends of Ocean Action, Isabella Lovin, sent me a letter which she had somehow intervened, and it was a letter from the Secretary General of OPEC to the minister in Algeria. And if you read that letter, your blood will boil. The Secretary General of OPEC trying to get all the OPEC countries to come down to these negotiations here and deny that fossil fuel phase-out should get any mention at all, or any mention of phasing it down, not phasing out, phasing it down. That is what the Secretary General of that organization stands for. OPEC stands for. And imagine, do they not have children? Don't they have grandchildren? Are their profits more important than the lives of their own children and their own grandchildren? So unfortunately, I have to leave UAE angry as I was when I came in. And it's not all bad, because anger is an energy and it keeps you going. And the caffeine effect is kind of worn off now. I don't, thousands of espresso will not do it anymore. And the adrenaline's are running down. So, I guess we all go up and do what we have to do around the world and get together again next year in Baku, it sounds like. So, look, you all know what we're faced with, but from what I'm hearing, actually from Ocean Conservancy, the GST language there is not too bad. We've managed to get some good mention of ocean in there. Luis, is that still the case? The language is still there? Good. Okay, good. Still got a bit of negotiating time left where they could take it out, but keep the pressure on everybody. And that's the name of the game. I don't go to negotiations anymore because I spend so much of my life sitting down in the dungeons of the UN till dawn doing these negotiations, and I pity the poor people that are in those rooms, but they're doing the job for all of us. So those that are on your side, go and try and influence them, support them, and thank them for what they're doing. The Friends of Ocean and Climate performs a really important role. There was a time not so long ago, not so many years ago, where we couldn't even get inside the tent. We couldn't even look inside the tent for what was going on with the UNFCCC negotiations. And yet the ocean, the sun, the ocean, anthropogenic gases, that's it. That's what creates the climate, right? The climate of today, anyway. So it's kind of, I don't know, just ridiculous that the ocean was being kept out of things. Forests were there and all the rest. Agriculture, rightly, there, but not the ocean. So the good news is we're now there after a long fight. Glasgow is really the turning point of that. We've now got our co-facilitators. We have the annual talks in Bonn, as you know, many of you go to them. At July next year, I'm going to be thanking Chile and Canada for the fantastic job they've done. They've reported here, and they will continue on through to the end of next year. But in Bonn in July, I'm going to be proposing that we elevate the co-facilitator position to a ministerial role. Because I think when you get to the COPs, if you've got two ministers representing you, it just gives you a bit more clout when you get into the negotiations. So if you know of any countries that are prepared to take over from Chile and Canada when their term runs out at the end of next year, and you have a couple of keen ministers, just make some good suggestions to us. We'll start talking about it over the next year. I've already talked to the co-facilitators about it, and they think it's a great idea. So let's get a couple of keen countries, one from the north, one from the south. So that is our next big gathering, I guess, for the Ocean and Climate Friends. And then Baku, and we're going to work out over the next 12 months what we really want to hit them with in Baku. But the basic thing is, this movement which we are pushing to get to renewable energy, whatever OPEC says, we're going to phase out fossil fuels. We're going to get to renewable energy. It's the logical thing to do. It's increasingly the right economic thing to do. Jobs, health, everything. Just that is the future. It gives our grandchildren security. So it's the logical way. And OPEC, we just got to consign them to the dustbin of history if that's what their stand is at the moment. And we've got to move in all those other spheres as well. We've got to move towards in the protein transition. We've got to stop eating the way we eat. We've got to move to plant-based diets. That's our kids are already doing that. We're a bit slow. My wife and I gave up beef 5 years ago at the UN because we just read too many reports about what beef is doing to this planet and stealing out future from young ones. So we gave up beef. No more hamburgers, no more roast beef. And it's funny, if you do it like that, if you just say our grandchildren are more important than eating beef, it's easy, just do it, it's done. We never touch beef again. So those things can be done. And of course, nature-friendly circular economies, that's the other direction we're going in. We've got to stop making war on nature, make peace with nature. Secretary General of the United Nations has asked us to do that. And the best way of doing that is finding the circular economies that are nature-friendly. And one of the best examples that I'll leave you with to think about is plastic. We've got this plastic treaty under negotiation. And we hope the best for it, right? I mean, we've had this amazing tide of environmental victories, with Montreal, with the Global Biodiversity Framework, with BB&J Treaty in New York. WTO's dragging their feet a bit now, but they've been pretty good on getting rid of harmful fisheries subsidies. Now we've got the Plastic Pollution Treaty under negotiation, text-based. We'll get a treaty. The worry will be that it'll be a treaty that's just kind of accommodating the plastic industry. We have to be a lot more aggressive, I think. I've had a good talk with Inger Anderson while we've been here. There is text in there about nature-friendly alternatives to plastic. But I'm sure that because of the power of the 20 or so countries which are behind the plastic industry. And remember that ultimately it's the oil and gas industry. And it is the future of the oil and gas industry. They realize as we get out of petroleum, they're going to be suffering, their profits are going to be suffering, so they're putting everything now into plastic as their future. So, but, plastic, we know what it is. Don't let it near your kids. Come on. It's not good for our bodies. We know it crosses the blood-brain barrier, the placenta barrier, everything. It's changing hormonal structures. It's not good. And any doctor you talk to will say, be careful about plastic. So we've got to be strong on that plastic treaty. Get that message there. This is not just an accommodation of the plastic industry, how they can pretend to be the good guys again. The nature-based alternatives to plastic would be here everywhere, in our supermarkets, wrapping our food, the jug, seaweed, algae, plant-based alternatives would be here, would be living in that age now, except for the fact that for all of my lifetime, plastics have been developed on the back of that subsidized oil and gas industry. And it's impossible to compete against virgin polymers, which basically come out free from spew out free from the oil and gas industry. And how can you compete against that? It's almost free. And then if you go and you see what those polymers are, they call them nurdles. You go to a place near a refinery where they're produced, and I've done that in Scotland in the Firth of Forth, and get a spade and dig down. It permeates nature and it's there for thousands of years. So anyway, guys, I will get out of your hair, get in my pajamas and go. But keep the fight up, huh?
Well, you guys kind of got to see Angry Peter there for a little bit. That was entertaining. And again, thank you, Ambassador Thompson, for all of your work. And yeah, I think you really hit home the importance of all of the different pieces there. And I think remembering that these are issues that are kind of in silos right now, especially the ocean, which has always been kind of put off in the corner. If you haven't noticed that our pavilion is way down here at the end of the walkway. And the importance of cross-sectoral and multilateral collaboration across UNFCCC processes, just like the INC, the UNFCCC. We need to bring the ocean into all of those so that we can be more collaborative and actually make impactful change towards the climate crisis. But that is a hard act to follow. I know that Peter Thompson is quite inspiring. But next I'd like to move on to our panel. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our moderator, Susan Rufo, Senior Advisor of Ocean and Climate for the United Nations Foundation. And I'm going to introduce the other panelists, and when you hear your name, come on up and join Susan. Beatrice Yorty, Director of Carbon Markets and Clean Mobility, DG Climate, European Commission. Unfortunately, we're missing Ambassador Alana Seed right now, but if she comes late, we'll throw her up on stage too. Kate Guy, Senior Advisor and Managing Director for Cross-Cutting Climate Issues in the Office of Special Presidential Envoy for Climate, United States. Gonzalo Guayaquil, Plastics and Climate Change Coordinator and UNFCCC SBI Vice Chair at the Directorate of Environment, Climate Change and Oceans, Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Chile. And Catherine Chabot, Member of the European Parliament with France Renew. Thank you, Susan. The floor is yours.
Great, thank you so much. Is that on? Do I need to do anything? Okay, great. If anyone over there wants to move into the center, you are welcome. Come join us, please. So thank you, Whitney and Luis, Ambassador Thompson, in your absence. It's wonderful to be up here with so many ocean leaders and climate leaders. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you all on the panel for joining us. We know that the ocean is a fundamental pillar of life on Earth, and it bears the brunt of climate change. But for too long, it's really been thought of as a victim. And in fact, what we really need to do is think about the ocean as a source of solutions to climate change. And I think more and more that narrative is coming out. And so today's panel is really about how do we think about the ocean as a source of solutions? How do we make the most of the ocean-based solutions that we have? Because we're not making the most of them now within this room and within all of the other negotiations that Ambassador Thompson talked about and that I think this panel is going to talk about again. I think the ocean has to be front and center in order to really create what is a resilient, equitable, net zero, and biodiversity positive world. And that's really the goal that we should be shooting for. So we know that we can't reach 1.5 without a healthy ocean. So before we dive into just some very specific questions, I want to ask each of you just to share some reflections on that ocean climate nexus and the role of the ocean within this room, but also in this wider context. So Director Jordi, I'll start with you, please. You have the floor.
Thanks a lot, Susan, and a big thanks to TNE and to Ocean Conservancy for the invitation. Let me start just saying that oceans are precious, and they are precious as blue zinc. It's a blue carbon zinc function. They are precious keeping marine ecosystem. They have a role in mitigation, so mitigation, absorption, stopping acidification. So they are precious, and I fully agree, Susan, what you have just said, that we will not reach the 1.5 without healthy oceans. But in the European Union, let me just start with that. As part of the Green Deal, we have a clear direction of traveling. We have included in exactly 3 weeks, the ETS, the emission trading system, will include the maritime sector. And I'm proud of that. It was not an easy negotiation, but we have it. And we are covering all the emissions of intra-European ports, so every ship traveling from one port to another, and also 50% of whatever country, whatever ship coming from whatever country and touching European ports. We cover 50% for allowing that the third countries also cover this other 50%. And this is a clear invitation to please put in place a carbon pricing in other jurisdictions. Just to tell you, because I have heard some discussion of carbon markets is concentrated on trading, and not only that, the ETS has an objective of reducing emissions of minus 62% by 2030 compared to 2005. And that's not an easy path, not impossible path, but that's not an easy path. For maritime will mean that it will need to reduce every year 4.4% of emissions. 4.4% of emissions every year. We started in 3 weeks, as I said, and we started in a gradual. So it will be first 40% of the emissions, then 70%, and then 100%. I'm very happy to be here with Madame Chabot, member of the Parliament, that we have has been key in this negotiation of Council and Parliament. So, and this is part, an important thing, in 2026, because I'm also very proud of that. 2026, we will include methane and nitrous oxide. They will be part of the ETS. So this extension of the ETS with maritime and shipping is a game changer. We are seeing methanol, starting the e-methanol. We are seeing nearly every week industry announcing. We see the engagement of the industry, and industry in a larger concept. And it's part of the Green Deal. I will not, because I don't want to take all the time, but just to mention that we are working in parallel also in Fuel EU maritime regulation, meaning on greenhouse gas intensity. that we will be reduced yearly. Also, very important, renewable directive. So as you know very well, and we have here in this COP more than 120 countries who have signed a tripling of renewables by 2030, and I'm very happy of hearing that. Just to say that in Europe we have the Renewable Directive, I'm sure you have heard about it, that puts a binding target of getting in 2030 42.5%, and this is binding, and aspirational of 45%. Just to say that oceans, just to recall, oceans are the house or the home of tidal, offshore, the home of photovoltaic, floating installations, also wave energy, and we have also a European objective of having 300 gigawatts only of offshore wind and 50% of what we call 300 of offshore wind and 40% of what we call the ocean energies, just to have it in the sea basin by 2050. So very important. I mean, there has been in the last 3 years an impressive advancement, and in 3 weeks we will open a bottle of champagne to celebrate that maritime is in the path for decarbonizing.
Thank you. I think we should all open a virtual bottle with you. I want to cross the Atlantic, Kate, and come to you. And
Thank you, Susan, and thanks to all of you, particularly thanks to Luis and the entire group of friends of Ocean and Climate. It has been really extraordinary from my perspective on the U.S. delegation to see the sleeper cell of the FOOC group, the Friends of Ocean group, at work throughout this entire COP. And I'll speak about that a little bit. But to the point of why a group like this is so impactful and so important is because we're able to sort of raise ambition to higher levels, but also sort of across different negotiation streams here at COP and other sectors that really Luis and the team began weeks, months ago planning for this moment. And I think that work has paid off. We feel really confident about how ocean is currently referenced in the global stocktake. It's important to defend what is in there. So for the other governments here, let's work together on that. But we also think that it sort of shows the good work of the Ocean Climate Dialogue that happened this past year for the first time and can sort of continue that on. Now, why we think it's so important to sort of show, even in a few words in this text, the importance of the ocean is because the ocean, as we've heard, is something that cuts across so many of the elements of climate that we're working on together. That's mitigation, that's adaptation, and that's more of these cross-cutting areas where, as Ambassador Thompson said, it's too often left to the side. So from a mitigation perspective, that's what we're here to talk about, and we just heard some of those elements. But it's ocean-based energy sources. It's ocean incredible sort of new technologies in terms of carbon capture, existing blue carbon, which is so important for mitigation, and new technologies for marine CDR that are being developed. On the adaptation side, it's the resilience of our coastal communities. It's the traditional knowledge of our coastal communities to understand how and where those adaptation investments really are most needed. It's early warning systems, which from our perspective in the US government, we're investing a lot of money in developing early warning systems internationally, and that is done by our National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Society, our administration. Our ocean experts are really key to those adaptation early warning system build-outs. And then from this cross-cutting perspective, it's food day here at COP, it's agricultural day. It's too often that blue foods are sort of left out of the conversation when it comes to food security and climate change, right? We know that while there are about 150 species that are really important for land-based agriculture and food security of those systems, there are 600 species that are critical to global aquaculture and blue food security. So how are we thinking about that in this wider world of climate and this wider world of the COP process? That's why things like the Ocean Climate Dialogue this summer were so important. This blue food topic that might be seen to not really have a place in the climate discussion is critical to our work. So as we're sort of raising ambition in the text and in those, what did Ambassador Thompson call them, the depressing negotiating rooms of the dungeons of the UN? We've all been in them. I know many here have escaped them just for this panel. While we're doing that, though, it's important to think about all of what we've heard over these past 2 weeks and all of the ways that the ocean is at the forefront of the solution, because we also know that it's at the forefront of the risks as well. And our US government, through the Inflation Reduction Act, actually has poured billions of dollars into building resilience in communities to that risk. We have worked really hard on a whole of government ocean climate action plan that gets at some of these elements. Just today, we rolled out the ocean acidification plan, because even the ocean acidification aspect is an area of risk that we have done too little work on, and I know folks care about here. I haven't even talked about shipping yet, but I think I'll hold that for the next, just to say sort of thanks to all of them, all of those in this room for this work, but we have to redouble our efforts because the challenges are getting that much stronger. Thanks, Susan.
Thank you, Kate. I'm going to move down now to the Eastern Pacific. And Chile was one of the founders of the Friends of the Ocean and Climate, has been a true ocean champion for as long as I've been doing this. So, Gonzalo, I'd love to hear what you have to tell us.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon to everybody. First of all, I also want to recognize Luis and the team for all the help and support that they put throughout weeks to make us to be here today and make us possible to present to you. In our case, actually, we have a long story, as you said it before, and actually the partnership with the US. And if you allow me to recall a little bit, everything started with the Secretary Kerry at the time. It was the first Our Ocean conference in Washington, and that was supposed to be a standalone conference. So then our foreign minister, Heraldo Muñoz, went to Secretary Kerry and said oh, this is amazing, everything that you have done. Why we don't continue these efforts? This was 2014. And Secretary Kerry and the team said oh, that's a great idea, let's try it again. So we did the second Our Ocean conference in Chile at the time, and that was the first time we actually started discussing the ocean and climate nexus in preparation for the Paris Agreement. At the time called the legally binding agreement. We didn't have a name for that yet. So we have all these discussions, and we tried together, and we pushed really hard, and we got the ocean in the Paris Agreement first. And then when we have the COP presidency in 2019, COP25 also, again, Chile came forward and said oh, we need to have more substance now that we have the Paris Agreement, how we actually bring the ocean within the negotiations and within the UNFCCC framework. And that's how we have the ocean dialogue that also we chair together again with the US. We started the first dialogue and it has been quite successful, and people now recognize the ocean actually is an integral part of the UNFCCC system. The atmosphere doesn't stop on land, it continues throughout the ocean. So now we're here today. So it has been a long story, almost 10 years, 9 years to be, kind of 8-9 years. And now we're doing other things. So I've been really, I've been really fortunate because I was working in the Our Ocean conference at the time. I was in the Paris Agreement, and now I'm the lead negotiator for the plastic treaty. So I've been basically going the whole loop. And then, of course, we're going to discuss a little bit about that also. And again, the plastic also has an ending, and it's in the marine environment. So we need to focus on that. But in general terms, I will say that the whole climate and ocean nexus has been an enormous effort for many parties, and now we can see that it's successful. And of course, we need many things to do, but the ETS, for example, the Inflation Reduction Act, the Green Shipping Challenge, and many other issues, I think all that come from all these years that we have really trying to put the ocean in the center of the discussions.
Yeah, thank you. I think you're absolutely right. Madame Chabot, we're going to fly over Palau, where Ambassador, and wish Ambassador Seed the best, because I'm sure she's in one of those dungeon negotiating rooms right now. And I'll turn back and complete the circle with you.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Catherine Chabot, and today I am a member of the European Parliament, but I'm also a sailor and the co-founder of the Ocean and Climate Platform. So the story you were mentioning, I was in because we created the Ocean and Climate Platform in 2014, and I would like just to remember that before us, And during those first years after the Paris Agreement, we were so happy to have just the mention of the ocean in the preamble of the Paris Agreement. There was a lady, an American one, who carried ocean in all COPs, Biljana Sinsinsen. She's no more there, but I have a special thoughts about her. And so since about 30 years, I'm involved on all ocean issues because of the plastic I've seen while sailing around the world or crossing the Atlantic. And because also I'm an optimistic girl, even if sometimes I can have the same talk than Peter Thompson, because I think we are not going enough fast. But I'm an optimistic woman, so I worked on solutions since about 20 years. And I began 20 years ago trying to push solutions in the sailing industries, trying to develop a sailing boat of the future that has been considered as dangerous 15 years ago, because it was not the way that I'm talking about that because I will speak about maritime transport. And 10 years ago or 15 years ago, this industrial sector didn't understand that it was the future for them. In the parliament, I took this mandate trying to push all ocean issues in 3 committees. The development committee, very interesting, because before I arrived, ocean wasn't at the agenda of this committee, but we have a lot of issues with our relationships, with ocean issues in our relationships with developing third countries. I am also in the Envoy committee, Environment committee, and the Fisheries committee, and I'm trying to push all ocean issues, and especially the blue carbon. The blue carbon is not included in our European legislation, and I'm trying to highlight that we need, as member states, etc., we need to put NDCs based on ocean solutions and especially on the coastal and marine ecosystems. I'm involved also on the maritime transport, the fuel-EU maritime that Beatrice Jordi mentioned. Very interesting, and I am also in the delegation of the Parliament in the MEPC. You know the MEPC, the Environment Committee of the International Maritime Organization, etc., etc. So just to conclude for this presentation, I'm happy because today I think we are not going enough fast, but if you look backward, we have done a lot of work since 10 years and I know that Chile is really, and John Kerry, very, very committed on those topics. And of course, EU, and we will see with maritime transport that sometimes EU push trying to build the framework at the EU level and trying to push at the global level. But EU doesn't communicate enough on what we are doing, and I think we should continue and to push forward. Thank you.
Thank you. So clearly, there is so much that we could actually be diving into in this ocean event, but I'm going to focus us maybe just on maybe a lightning round of questions, because I know our time is ticking, but I want to make sure that we hit some really important issues that you've all already raised and maybe just dive a tiny bit deeper. So, Director Jordi, I just want to come back to you, and we've talked about shipping, and I spend all of my time on shipping, so I love this topic. But the International Maritime Organization is the UN body that regulates shipping internationally, and that includes reducing the sector's GHG emissions. But action through other channels is still not precluded. It doesn't mean it has to go through the IMO. So I guess the question is, what role can the UNFCCC play in this space, and what can individual states do to support climate action on the international maritime front? And you've told us a bit about that already, so please.
Yeah. Well, I will try, and I will try also to communicate better what we do as a catalyzer sometimes of what happens at international level from European perspective. Well, first let me tell that from a European point of view, our efforts clearly do not stop in Europe. So we have been working very strong in the IMO, that we were also together in London in the July negotiation, and I think that what it was out of this MEPC session, it was very good. So it was a big success. I mean, the big success is the carbon neutrality in 2050, even if we have a kind of strange advert before, about, by, around, just two, but 2050 is there, carbon neutrality is there, and we have we have ambitious checkpoints or intermediate targets for 2030 and 2040. So IMO results are very good. And I think that the technical measures and the economic measures, we are starting working there as European, as all jurisdictions together with US, that we work very well in July, also with Chile and with more. That's because this is the beauty of UN and of course the challenge. So there's a lot to come now, and I think that UNFCCC, because we have been in IMO and also in ICAO, that we try to shake the IMO in the sense of saying UNFCCC has a Paris Agreement, you need to move, you need to be coherent, and the pressure, it was felt, I think, in IMO. So I think that the coherence between the UN agencies, coherence and to equalize the highest, is a top priority. UN is a myriad of agencies, and I think that UNFCCC, yes, we need to put maritime in NDCs. We need to put coherence between agencies. And just to say that the 2 points, an example, economic measure, you know that we need to do in 2 years, we need to come out with an economic measure. And this economic measure could be a levy, and if this could be a levy, this levy could help for decarbonize the industry, the maritime industry, but also could help vulnerable countries. And here we come to UNFCCC. So there is a lot that it can be done in coherence, and it will be very powerful that all the UN agencies align seriously and strongly with Paris Agreement's goals.
I couldn't agree more. And so I guess that's a good segue to come back maybe to this forum, the UNFCCC. And, you know, Kate, to talk a little bit about sort of within the NDC context, even if we see all of the NDCs implemented, the global GHG emission levels in 2030 are still going to be well above what's required to keep 1.5 alive. So I guess looking to another solution, what needs to be done to ensure that the energy transition really does include offshore energy, solutions like offshore energy, that it's on track, and that they're really accelerating so that we can achieve the targets of the Paris Agreement?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and it's one where no beating around the bush that certainly some of these ocean-based energy sectors are facing hard times right now, and we understand that, and we spent a lot of time here at COP and earlier this year sort of talking with the industry, working with them, understanding how we all have to sort of band together and get through this tough moment. But I think I'm buoyed in sort of 4 ways, which I'll run through very quickly here, that we can be better thinking about the mitigation aspect as we're setting our next goals for ourselves as countries, but also for all of our sectors. The first is this energy question. To your point, how are we investing in the technologies, some of them which we don't even have yet, which sort of, I talked about the Inflation Reduction Act, our Department of Energy, even our Department of Defense, our Navy is really sort of pouring work into investment and new innovation of these technologies. And I think that's what it's going to take all of us to meet even our 2030 goals, let alone goals after that, is sort of that investment and innovation in the critical ocean-based sectors where we need it. The second that's, I think, important for mitigation, and we talked about this, we know that the 1.5 goal set in the Paris Agreement is at least in some way going to require some sort of carbon capture capture and storage. And that could be blue carbon ecosystems and all of the incredible carbon that they store to, again, new technologies, and many of them marine-based and ocean-based, to get us to our goals. And we need those technologies and the full suite need a lot more research to understand what is effective, what is safe, what is sort of environmentally sound, and what can sort of do the job in the best way possible. It's another area where our NOAA administration is doing a lot of work and trying to roll out sort of that next generation of the future of carbon capture. The third is shipping. We've already heard about all of the work we need to do together in the IMO, but I think in that way we need private sector at the table, and they want to be at the table. That's one thing I heard from them consistently across this COP, is that this is an area, especially under the incredible umbrella of the Green Shipping Challenge, where the shipping industry has the incentive to actually work together. You know, it's such a competitive industry. They're always competing for that little margin amongst each other. But when it comes to decarbonization and when it comes to green fuels and next generation green ships, there's actually a lot of incentive for them to work together. So I think that's an area of promise in terms of mitigation. And the final one that I think we should feel buoyed in but not let a pressure on is finance, right? Climate finance going to ocean solutions. And I say this because it's still too little. I think we spent a lot of time at this COP as well saying to the finance community and the financiers, put your money where your mouth is, including on sort of blue solutions. And the good news is that we have an incredible space for all of those new commitments and financial announcements to be made, which is at the Our Ocean Conference, which we heard about. The next one, the sort of 10 years anniversary, Our Ocean Conference will be in Greece in April. What better place to talk about shipping, to talk about ocean-based energy, to talk about blue foods even, and to make some good ocean-based finance commitments than on the stage at Our Ocean. So hope you'll all join us and join Greece there. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to zoom back out of the UNFCCC. Gonzalo, you mentioned that you're the lead negotiator for Chile at the International Negotiating Committee on Plastic Pollution. So can you tell us a little bit about what are the linkages between that forum and this one, and how can we better integrate work on plastics and climate?
Oh, that's a really tough question.
In a lightning round.
Yes. Well, of course, I mean, almost 99% of plastics, polymers, are made of fossil fuels. Means either natural gas or petroleum. So, of course, when we're talking about emissions and we're talking about a low carbon economy, we have to deal with what in the INC process we call the upstream, which means how we can decrease the amount of virgin plastics that we produce, but at the same try to mitigate the issues. And why is that? Because as negotiators in the INC process, we understand that plastic is not going to be finished from our life. There are many good uses for plastic at the moment, but we need to try to reduce the amount that is coming from the factories. So how we're going to use it, and that's the whole discussion at the moment, is we have talked about the upstream, the midstream, and the downstream level. The downstream is basically the recycling, so we take back into the feedstock. The midstream is basically the reuse, how we design packaging, how we design new alternatives for the business industry to come to the public, and then the public also can serve a little bit more and they are more conscious, how we can actually make sure that we have some schemes like the EPR schemes that we have in some countries, other countries don't have it, or the US, for example, that I have discussed a lot with them also. I know that there is no EPR at the federal level, but there is in the region, some of the states they have it, so we are trying to harmonize, and the business community is really pushing for this. They say that right now there's a whole landscape of different policies, and somehow the INC process is trying to integrate all these policies to make it like a playing field for all these businesses to come up with solutions. Going back to the UNFCCC process, we have two areas that we can deal with emissions. One, of course, is the production of plastics, and that means that we can get feedstock. We reduce it in what we call the life cycle approach, the whole life cycle approach, in a way that we can create plastic and polymers from the waste industry, and we need a new way to deal with the waste. And that comes with the second part, because in many countries right now, everything goes to a landfill, and then there is a lot of production of methane because of that. And methane is one of the most powerful GHG gases. So if we deal with the recycled part, we deal with the midstream, then we don't need new feedstock coming in the amount that we're having now. And with that, we will gradually reduce the amount of new polymers that are coming from fossil fuels industry. So it's a whole of life cycle approach that we're trying to get. The INC process also is advancing quite fast. We just got the mandate as the UN system to start the negotiations last year, and we need to finish by the end of next year. So in MAA diplomacy, this is like basically a light round of light discussions. The next one is going to be in April in Ottawa, and the last one is going to be in South Korea. So countries are really struggling, really trying to come up to an understanding. But I must say that there is a really positive vibe. There's a lot of discussions going on. Of course, having 190 countries together in one table always is difficult. But we have, at least in the INC process, like the willing of the parties, the willing of the NGOs, the willing of all the non-state actors to really try to push for a solution. And we recognize, we acknowledge that this has not been like something that came out from last year, that has been a struggle from the ocean community. The ocean community was the one that actually brought the attention about the plastic issue. So that's why we also want to concentrate and focus on what is called the legacy plastic. That is one of the issues that we also have to deal in the INC process.
Great, thank you. So Madame Chabot, maybe, I swear I didn't put my thumb on the scale, but I want to go back to maritime and maybe bring all of these things together. So, because maritime shipping is a big consumer of fossil fuels, it's also a big transporter of fuels, so it's central to the international energy trade. And so I guess, how do you see the link between the climate action and shipping and this broader energy transition?
Yeah, thank you for this interesting question. But if you may, I would like just to add two things about renewable and plastic, because that's where, when it comes on solutions, we need to have a real integrated approach in all our solutions. We have an integrated maritime policy but we still, in Europe and everywhere in the world, we still take these topics put these topics in silos. And for renewable, I'm trying to push this idea. You know, there are innovations around infrastructure with positive impact. You can imagine that your offshore wind farm could help to develop the ecosystems and if you build your project with aquaculture, fishermen, etc., you have to imagine the eco-design of those, and it isn't really the case today. We have just probably one or two examples in the world of that kind of solutions. And in Europe, we have to implement, the maritime special planning, and we have not only to coexist, but also to find synergies. And that's the word, synergies. And about plastic, because I'm also very occupied on this topic, because I had a report on the Fisheries Committee on the impact of marine litter on fisheries, and I will be the rapporteur for the plastic pellets. And I just wanted to add one thing. You were speaking about the legacy of plastic. And I think in the negotiations for the plastic treaty, we are speaking about a systemic approach, but we are also speaking a lot of the beginning of the systemic approach. Of course, it's necessary, but we need to clean the earth. I know that we won't be able to clean the ocean, but for the rivers, and the estuaries, and especially in in Africa, in Asia, etc., because we won't have a future with those plastics. So now I will answer your question. It's very interesting because I've never heard that kind of question. Effectively, as you said, maritime transport will transport alternative fuels. A reaction on this question, because we are at a special moment where we need to rethink our model. And it's very strange. It's just a reaction, but it's very strange. Because we use actually fossil fuels, the first three answer we propose is alternative fuels. But we have to rethink, and you will see, because I will speak about the wind propulsion. Because I won't develop the EU legislation that we are building, but it's very interesting. I think we have three challenges. The first one is to promote not only efficiency, but also sufficiency. The problem in English, en français, it's la sobriété, but when you speak about sobriety, it's just... So at the beginning, I was speaking about sobriety, but I said, thank you, Catherine. So efficiency, and I think at the global level, because it's very complicated to develop, to work on the speed. But it's so easy. It's just good sense to try. So I'm trying to put this idea that is controversial to try at the global level to say we all have to reduce the speed of our boat. We can do it right now, and it will have a lot of very good consequences. The second thing, developing alternative fuels is an opportunity also for our ports, because today the ports are places where you have the transit of foods, but tomorrow it will be the hub of the energies. You will have energies, offshore energies. You can imagine our future ports like hub of energies. And the third challenge for me is to develop the wind propulsion, because we won't achieve our goals just with alternative fuels. As a sailor, I know that we have a lot of solutions, and we develop in Europe, but not only in Europe, already several solutions with wind, but we do not have, even in Europe, the framework that will help this sector to be developed. And for example, at the EU level, I'm trying to push this idea that the transition for maritime transport should be an opportunity to relaunch the shipyard in Europe, because there is an example with the canopy ship. Have you heard about Canopy? Canopy today is at sea. She transports the pieces of Ariane rocket, and the Ariane group asked for this boat to be built in Europe. So it's a cooperation inside the EU, and the reduction of emission is about 30%, and the reality is better than it was on the paper at the beginning. So I think we need to promote it at the global level, and not to think only through the alternative fuels. And to conclude, I think for the maritime sector, as for the fossil fuel sector, this moment, special moment that we live, must push them to rethink their model, leur raison d'être. The raison d'être is also an English word, la raison d'être. It comes from French, yeah. La raison d'être, because I think they have to, and they begin to think about themselves are not only actors of the technological transformation, but the society transformation. They have a social projects to build, they have to rethink their raison d'être. Thank you.
Thank you. I cannot add anything to anything you said, so please join me in thanking this a marvelous panel. I hope that you will all stay for wine so we can continue the conversation. But in the meantime, I'd like to invite up a second panel for another
Susan,
lightning round.
Susan, I'm sorry to interject. We did go a little bit over time since we started a little bit late and we have plenty to say, but I did want to introduce the Minister of Environment for Germany, Steffi Lemke, who can't sit on the second panel because she has to go, but she is going to provide opening remarks for us to kick us off into the second panel. Okay. And then Susan will introduce our second panel and we'll get going. So, Minister?
Great. Thank you all.
Yes, colleagues and friends of the ocean, let me start by thanking Transport and Environment for bringing us together today in order to discuss the important issue of ocean-based climate mitigation. As you know, the ocean is one of our most powerful allies in fighting the climate crisis. It produces oxygen, regulates the climate, and stores carbon. And however, this powerful ally is under threat. It's heating up and becoming more acidic. It is polluted and overexploited. And so we need to help our ocean recover. Marine protection is among my ministry's key priorities. We are currently working out a binding marine strategy. Its aim to harmonize environmentally friendly use with protection goals. And as you know, this is really difficult to solve this problem. Today, I would like to focus on two of the many challenges facing the marine environment: shipping emissions and offshore wind energy. Shipping plays an essential role in global transport. We realize just how important it is whenever there is a hold-up, like the blocking of the Suez Canal in 2021, which led to supply chain issues worldwide. At the same time, shipping is responsible for an estimated 3% of global greenhouse gas emissions. If it were a country, it would be among the top emitters worldwide. And its impact on climate change is projected to increase if we do not act decisively. This is a key climate policy aspiration for us. It's encouraging to see a number of new initiatives at the international level. I would like to highlight three aspects in this regard. First, I would like to thank the International Maritime Organization for submitting a strategy on reducing shipping emissions to the first global stocktake. We strongly support its 2050 climate neutrality target. Such initiatives are testimony to the ambitions of industry and member states. And in this context, I would encourage more parties to include their shipping emissions in their nationally determined contributions. Second, Germany encouraged the adoption of concrete actions at the level of the IMO aimed at reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 2025. We need to ensure that the climate neutrality targets are met through effective, fair, and inclusive measures. To this end, the adoption of a globally applicable greenhouse gas full standard and a universal greenhouse gas pricing mechanism is key. Third, we should aim at a just and equitable transition. I strongly back the idea of supporting least developed countries and small islands, developing states, in their efforts to transform their shipping sectors. It would be good if we found a way for them to benefit from any financial revenues we may generate from new measures adopted by the IMO. Friends of the Ocean, the aim of harmonizing the use of the sea with our nature conservation goals is also at the heart of our approach to offshore wind energy. This brings me to my second point. Germany's objective is to produce at least 30 gigawatt from wind power by 2030, 40 gigawatt by 2035, and 70 by 2040. And at the same time, we want to strengthen our efforts to protect the marine environment. It is therefore necessary to find a good balance between swift procedures and effective environmental impact screenings and mitigations. And I would say that we don't find this balance in the moment. We have to search it. With the aim of reconciling both objectives, Germany has introduced a system which creates substantial financial support for marine protection in areas with new wind turbines. We have a new law, and with this law we will allocate a part of the revenues from auctioning offshore wind projects permits to marine protection in the affected areas. This quota is currently set to 5% of these revenues. It will generate additional funding for marine conservation measures of around 670 million euros in 2024 alone. And this is a really large amount. This will be an important contribution to mitigating any negative impacts of offshore wind projects. And another 5% is allocated to a sustainable fishery. And so this 10% make really a big effort to marine protection. One of our concrete policy measures is to reconcile the use of the ocean with our goal to protect it. Many more measures from many more parties will be needed, and I'm looking forward to discussing this with you, not today, but in the future. And in closing, let me highlight the need for more research and environmental monitoring activities in this area. A global exchange of knowledge would ensure a more nature-friendly development of offshore wind power and more targeted mitigation efforts. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, I'd like to bring up the second panel. Does that sound all right? Yes. And this will really have to be a lightning round because we are running out of time. This is clearly a rich discussion. So if I could introduce our three panelists, Mr. Simon Ben-Maratze, Team Lead for Renewable Energy Technology and Infrastructure at the International Renewable Energy Agency, IRENA. Welcome. Arthi Anantanarayanan, Director for Plastics and Climate Initiative at Ocean Conservancy, and William Totes, Executive Director of Transport and Environment, also one of our hosts today. So we've heard a lot. I just want to dive right into some of the solutions. So let's talk about what you all are doing. So Simon, if I can start with you. In the net zero scenarios that are projected by IRENA and IEA, offshore renewables, and particularly offshore wind, are critical to ensuring a successful energy transition. So can you connect the dots on why this is critical to meeting our climate goals? And because of time, I think we've got about 3 minutes each, so lightning round. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'll try to be quick. Yes, so IRENA grounds its analysis of the global energy transition in our World Energy Transition Outlook, which maps a path toward net zero emissions. For that, wind in general is a paramount and important, crucial technology. Offshore wind today represents an immense opportunity for many coastal communities to build also their energy resilience. in the space of mitigation, I think the need to increase the focus on how we can better develop offshore wind park become a crucial topic. I'm fortunate to lead for IRENA the Global Offshore Wind Alliance, which is a multi-stakeholder alliance that aims to bridge the gap between, let's say, the knowledge from one region to another to find solutions to accelerate global offshore wind across geographies. In the drive today at COP28 to triple renewable energy capacity, we see a lot of potential for offshore wind, not only to reduce the reliance on fossil fuel import. For example, Minister Lemke mentioned the work of SEEDS in that regard, but also reduce the stress of ocean ecosystems by decreasing the acidification of oceans, but also aligning the proper use of marine spaces. So in that space, marine spatial planning and a discussion with the industry on how to develop sustainable offshore wind park become a very important discussion. We're also looking at how we can preserve and conserve ocean space. And as such, the work of countries together with the industry becomes important, not only to accelerate, because we are, unfortunately, we are very late, not this panel, but as a community for offshore wind, we need solution now. The aspect of permitting was there, but also we need to preserve environmental and social consideration when developing those parks. Today, after COP, the work starts. We need to mobilize all the ocean community to really work with country to integrate those measures into the NDCs and the National Adaptation Plan, and to provide an integral approach to developing and consider marine spaces. Furthermore, for many coastal community seeds, offshore wind energy is part of the blue economy. So the emphasis on job creation, the benefit it can provide by transitioning workforce which were previously working on the conventional offshore business will become a vector for many, many benefits in the future. And IRENA documents those benefits across our analysis. So concrete action, we need now to translate what does it mean to triple renewable capacity, to make sense of we have 7 to 8 years to reach 2030. Can we build offshore wind park in that space? I think we can. We need to talk with the financier to de-risk those offshore wind park and enable more, let's say, local value for those. And we are very fortunate also to work with Ocean Conservancy, for example, which have joined the alliance at the foundation in COP27. Today, 30 members for Goa are really working together to find solutions and accelerate the discussion around ocean-based mitigation.
Thank you. Okay, whirlwind tour, plastics. Arthi, plastics and climate change have incredible biodiversity and human rights implications for coastal communities in particular. So what are the opportunities to generate some co-benefits by dealing with these problems for the coastal communities?
Thank you. And you know, when we talk about plastics, so many of us come to the issue for plastic on the beach. I had dinner last night with an organizer from Port Arthur, Texas, a port community that's in the middle of an area that's facing much larger hurricanes, and he said, I buried someone in my community before I left, and I'm burying someone when I go back. And I think we have to remember that these things are utterly interlinked. But the good news is that actually, if we take the first step of plastic reduction and make that central to climate mitigation, that gets us to all three goals of protecting our ocean biodiversity, protecting people, and addressing the climate. And on climate, I think we have three issues that we need to pay attention to. One is something that we've talked about quite a bit today, the plastics treaty that has to touch plastic polymer production and that beginning of the life cycle. And we have to see that as a big climate win. The second is thinking about climate policies and making sure they're working for us and not against us. And just to give you an example, 2,500 pages of legislation in the Inflation Reduction Act, the word plastic does not appear once, and plastic is currently 10.5% of global oil use. And the growth of that oil use for plastics will slow down the energy transition. The third piece is to make sure that we're actually thinking about climate tech and innovation in the plastics context, right? We've done this pretty well in other sectors. In the power sector and transportation, we have seen incredible transitions in the past 5 years of really these things taking hold and capital markets moving towards them. We aren't there yet on the plastic space. We don't have that innovation. We don't talk about it as part of a climate solution. And there's huge opportunities in bringing that sector along.
Thank you. All right. So turning to the ocean-based climate solution of the day, maritime. William, we've talked a little bit about it already, but just from your perspective, how do you see the link between climate action and shipping and the broader energy transition? And where do we go from here? And how do we sort of incorporate some of these other principles of equity, biodiversity, climate in the work that's happening now?
Super. Thank you. Thank you so much. First of all, thank you so much for allowing us to co-host this event, which has given me an opportunity to come to COP for the first time in my life, which has been somewhat overwhelming, but also very inspiring. I'll talk about shipping, which is what I know best. I think 2023 has already been a huge year for shipping. Beatrice Jordi mentioned what the EU has done. I've been working at European level on transport for a long time, and shipping was always the one thing that we couldn't get any progress on. It was very, very, very frustrating. And the reason was that the IMO was always going to deal with it. I'm a bit inspired by the first speaker, so I'm just going to be a little more blunt than I intended to be. And so we have, in a very short space of time, done a number of things that I really think are game-changing in Europe. At the same time, the IMO has finally put together a strategy that if you implement that strategy, it is almost aligned with 1.5 degrees, and it would be an absolute game changer for the globe. Now, I would have three observations. The first is about, the topic of the day is kind of NDCs. We agreed as the world that countries should set economy-wide targets. I don't think there's anyone that could argue that shipping is not part of the economy. I think that would be very hard to sustain. And yet, many of us, almost no one is actually including shipping in the NDC. I think that is a huge problem. And I very much agree with the German Minister of Environment that we should be doing that. And I think the EU should lead by example, because actually we've done the work. So we could get some credit for it as well. Secondly, and this brings me to the IMO, it is really, it's really great to see that the IMO, after decades of inaction, has put together a good strategy. But the question is whether they will actually deliver the measures to achieve a 20% GHG cut by 2030, which is like in 5-6 years' time, and then carbon neutrality by 2050. What that will take in practice is it will indeed take a fossil fuel phase out, and I would say not just of the stuff you combust on the ship, but also the stuff you transport. And if we would manage to get such a deal globally, that would possibly solve some other problems as well. It will require, what is called an economic instrument, that actually means a price on carbon. And of course, there are many, many equity considerations there. So we can get back to that if you like. But the final point I would like to make here is that it is not just an opportunity. It is also a risk, because if you put hundreds of nations together to flesh out a fuel strategy, what could possibly go wrong? We have had OPEC mentioned, and a lot of those countries that are members of OPEC are very strong in IMO. And so I think it is upon us as a community, but also as progressive countries, to make sure that this does not become a transition to LNG and biofuels, but it becomes a transition to genuinely green fuels, primarily green ammonia and green methanol, so e-fuels. And that's going to be a huge lift, and we will see by the end of 2025 whether that is actually what we have achieved. And this is where I would like to conclude. It is, for me, this is really the last chance saloon for the IMO. They need to deliver on that strategy, because we have had many opportunities to do it already. So thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you all for being passionate and also on time. I would like to turn over the final word to Beatrice. So thank you so much. Thank you once again to this amazing panel.
I just come here very fast because I know there's wine waiting, so it's I'm under the extreme pressure. Just if I can say, well, first, big thanks to Ocean Conservancy and Transport and Environment. Super interesting panel, so big thanks to them. Number one, we cannot reach 1.5 degrees without a healthy and resilient oceans. Oceans are precious. Oceans are in front of the solutions, and oceans are also first line in the risk. Number two, keep the pressure, phase out fossil fuels. It concerns also oceans. We have homework from the ambassador. Number three, put maritime in the NDC. Also homework for all of us. Number four, we are 3 weeks far from the big bottle of champagne, sorry that I'm becoming an alcoholic, bottle of champagne of carbon pricing starting in Europe and covering 50% of maritime emissions. Number 5, 23 is also a game changer for IMO. So let's work to make the decisions of July in 2023 a reality. Number 6, we have wind, offshore wind and marine protection as a good couple and a good synergies. So I think I propose to reverse the blue and green should never be seen to blue and green should always be seen. Change the meaning. Number, and I'm losing the numbers. So next number. Innovation is a must. We will not make it without innovation. Marine and ocean-based plastics, you mentioned 10% of oil consumption. Watch out there. We need private sector around the table. We need the money. We need the dynamism. We need the investment. And last point, let's rethink our raison d'être. I think this could be the good future. Many thanks to all.
Thank you, Beatrice, and thank you so much, everyone, for your quick panel, for wrapping it up, being on time. We actually made it, which means that the wine is right outside. You guys are free. Thank you so much for coming to the event.